These days, in the web development world, we often hear people mentioning the terms responsive design and mobile first approach. Let's try and understand what is meant by these terms and how they affect the way you design your websites and your web applications. Your obvious question is going to be, why consider responsive design? To help us understand this, let's consider how people access websites these days. Traditionally, when websites were first designed, you could pretty much assume that people would be browsing your websites from a computer. These days, your websites could be visited from a smartphone, a tablet, or a computer with different screen sizes and screen resolutions. How do we render our website consistently on devices of different screen sizes? The one-size-fits-all approach that traditional website designers have taken no longer fits the bill. We need a better approach, an approach that will automatically adapt your website to the size of the screen on which it is being viewed. This is where we have to take an approach to adapt to the user's viewport. This has to be built into your website design and development so that it will automatically adapt to the viewport of the user's device. To help you better appreciate the need for addressing devices of different screen sizes, I am taking the help of the developer options that my Safari browser provides that enables me to view the website with screens of different sizes. So that hopefully will convince you of why we need responsive web design. So here you see the Coursera website being rendered on a 1920 by 1080 screen size. This would be a typical large desktop or a high resolution laptop screen. Then let's consider the same website being viewed using a smaller screen size. So you see automatically your screen layout is slightly adjusting to the size of the viewport of your device. Same thing at 800 by 600. So let's go down in screen sizes. This is an iPad Pro's view of the same site. This is an iPad Air 2's size. This is an iPad Mini 4's size. Note the transition from an iPad Mini 4 size to an iPhone 6s Plus in portrait mode. You now notice that the navigation bar has now collapsed into a button here, which when you click will reveal the options from your navigation bar. And let's look at the same thing in our iPhone 6s in landscape mode. Note how the screen adapts itself. Similarly, for an iPhone 6s in landscape mode, and go down to an iPhone SE, and you see how the website has changed the way it is being rendered. So hopefully this example has illustrated to you how and why we need responsive web design. The second related concept that you will hear is mobile first. The mobile first approach instead looks at designing your website for a mobile device first. So consider how you would satisfy the screen constraints of your mobile device. And then as your screen size expands, you would automatically start adapting your website to the larger and larger screen sizes, perhaps revealing more and more of the content so as to take advantage of the increasing screen real estate. So the same website, when seen on a mobile device, might have only parts of the information being revealed to the user, but then when rendered on a full-fledged desktop, it might show a lot more detail version of the website. Now, this has to be automatically adapted based upon the information that you get from the device from which your website is being viewed. So how do we get this information? Fortunately, doing responsive web design is supported by many of the modern front-end web UI frameworks, including Bootstrap. So when we looked at Bootstrap's definition on its web page, it says responsive mobile-first approach. So how do we go about doing responsive web design? So this is where there are several concepts that are built into your front-end web UI frameworks that come to the aid when you need to do responsive web design. First and foremost is what is called as a grid system. We're going to look at the Bootstrap's grid system in more detail in the next lecture so that we will understand exactly how we can leverage that to be able to do responsive web design. The second aspect is fluid images, so that your images that you include in your website will automatically adapt itself to the screen size. And the third part is what is called as CSS media queries. From your CSS code, you can query the size of the media and then appropriately adjust your CSS classes to fit the size of the device's screen. Now, how do media queries work? Let's look at that next. Media queries are supported in CSS like this. So the technology allows you to do a media query to specify the minimum width of the screen under which this particular set of CSS classes will be active. So this would be specified in your CSS file as @media, and then within brackets you specify, for example, min width. There are a lot more options to the media queries than what I'm showing here. This is just one example of how you would do a media query in your CSS code. Taking a look at Bootstrap's CSS code itself, let's go in and see how media queries are being used by Bootstrap. So here you see an example of a media query where it says @media and min width 576 pixels, and then it specifies that this particular CSS class called container, which we will learn more about in the next lecture and also in the exercise that follows, we will see that the container's width is set based upon the width of the screen. Similarly, for a higher width screen, the container width is automatically adjusted. So this is what enables your web UI framework to support responsive web design. So doing media queries, your web UI framework is able to establish what kind of device you're rendering your website on and correspondingly adjust the CSS classes to fit that particular device's screen size. So then obviously the next question that is going to come into your mind is, how do we do this in practice? Fortunately, if you start with a well-designed front-end web UI framework like Bootstrap, things become very straightforward. We will learn more about this in the next lecture and the exercise that follows.